Hi, this is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from untamed wild Mongolia, live in Ulaanbaatar, the capital. It is a beautiful day, Saturday, the 16th, 2022, for some of you, the 15th, and hopefully the internet holds up. Hopefully we're able to have a nice, productive, beautiful session. It's been a long time since I've had a chance to have a proper AMA with you guys and gals, but I really do enjoy them and I love them. So let's get through it. I was yesterday out in Ugi, which is the mountainous city in the western part of the country, mostly Cossack with the eagle hunters. And then the day before that, I was out in the Gobi Desert and I saw the flaming cliffs and I hung out with all the desert nomads and got a chance to play around with the camels and the rest of the gangs. So it's been a really interesting trip. The first day I was here, literally got off the plane, head to a presidential reception at the presidential palace. I was gracious enough to get an invitation. I'll show you guys. These presidential invitations are pretty cool. So here's what it looks like. And then they give you all the details and the official seal and so forth. So that's nifty. I got a chance to hang out with the U.S. ambassador in Mongolia and a chance to see all the movers and shakers. President welcomed all of us very warmly. He still has his imperial guard. So they have the horsemen with the leather armor and the bow and everything like that. And the palace is actually built in a beautiful private valley. So Mongolia has grown a lot. Since we opened the market 3 years ago, there were less than 2,000 holders of ADA. There's now 140,000 in a country of only 3 million people, which is pretty remarkable growth considering there's very little marketing that had been done here. It's just word of mouth and organic growth in jurisdiction. And when we came here, there were 2 cryptocurrency exchanges. Now there are about 14. A lot of NFT projects, a lot of really interesting things floating around. Everything from they want to do gold-backed stable coins to art projects to restoration projects to educational initiatives. One of the reasons why we're here is we did a Haskell training class in Mongolia right when COVID broke out. And because of COVID, we weren't able to do it in person. Normally, we actually fly out here. Our director of education comes, Lars Brunius, and he gets to learn from the local culture and ingratiate himself in that respect. Unfortunately, it had to be done remotely. And I promised that when COVID receded a bit, I would come to Mongolia and when the borders are open again and actually hold a proper graduation. So that's what we're doing today, is that we're holding here in Ubi a graduation for all the Haskell students that attended and finished the course. We hired about, I think, 3 or so who were the best candidates from that class. And our hope is to make this a reoccurring thing where we keep training new people. We had a great meeting with the dinner with the Minister of Digital Innovation and Communication. She's a pretty remarkable woman, graduated from high school at 14, college at 18, went to Oxford, and now she is in charge of digital transformation for the entire country. And I believe that blockchain can be a major pillar of that, from everything from national ID to supply chain assurances. So a lot of stuff is happening, and it's really cool to be here, and it's cool to be back on the road. I really miss this place. Mongolia is just really amazing. There's so many amazing things in the geology, in the landscape. It does remind me a bit about kind of a roll-up between Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. And then you see the culture. The Cossack culture is totally different than the desert culture, and it's very different in the city. Of course, we met the Who, not the WHO Who, but the HU Who, which is a famous Mongolian rock band, if you guys are interested. Really good music. They were at the presidential reception. We also saw some throat singing and other things in the countryside, and then some traditional Cossack music out in the west. So it's real fun to see these things. When you spend some time with nomads, there needs to be some reflection on the meaning of economic identity. When we talk about economic identity, I don't like the term financial inclusion. Financial inclusion, to me, says you're welcome to be part of my system. So you remove agency and autonomy from people. You're saying you have to join what we have. I like the term instead economic identity or economic agency, because it says you have equality with everybody. You're allowed to live the life that you want to live, to be in the place that you want to be, to have the customs you want to have, and you still have access to the financial markets. Those Cossack eagle hunters, they love what they do. And for the most part, they're mostly untouched by modernity, modern society. There's some things here and there, like they use Facebook Messenger and they have a solar panel, and they use motorcycles instead of, dirt bikes instead of camels and things like that to get around. Okay. But they're just as comfortable on the back of a horse with an eagle out in the middle of nowhere as they are on the back of a motorcycle or in a city. So how do you give people like that identity and agency so that they can participate in the world economy, but they can stay as nomads if they choose? That's really the magic of what we do as an industry. And it was really reassuring to see that we have a path to this. We call it RealFi. And you have levels of RealFi, level 1, level 2, level 3. So the first level of RealFi is that you have infrastructure. So you need telecommunications, energy, and computing. So you need the ability to move packets of information around. You need devices to process them. And obviously those devices require electricity to power them. Now, if none of that is decentralized and it's all controlled by one actor, cryptocurrencies don't matter. Digital identity doesn't matter because you can be shut out by a single actor. When you look at the second layer, you need identity. And identity has two big parts. There's verification and reputation. Verification is I make a factual claim. I've been to this place. I have this degree. I've done this thing. And it's true or false. Reputation is a value judgment. And so instead of yes, no, it's questions like, do you trust this person? Is this person reliable? It depends. I might trust them to mow my lawn, but not with my kids, that type of deal. Again, if any of that is centralized, cryptocurrencies don't work, because in practice, all the kinds of things you'd want to do are strangled by that. This is one of the reasons why I get so irritated with Bitcoin maximalists. Because they seem to feel that just because they have this magic money, that's not even money, it's a digital commodity that just lives in the sky somewhere, that somehow this replaces the need for a decentralized power grid and a decentralized telecommunications grids and decentralized computing. And this completely obviates the need for identity systems, which are required to make these things useful and for commerce to work. It's effectively the lubricant of it. The third floor of RealFi are the actual applications. By the way, none of them run on Bitcoin. Peer-to-peer lending marketplaces, Oracle, stablecoins, these things. You have to do other weird stuff. So I think a lot about the RealFi stack, and we keep one foot in countries like Mongolia because it's a safe place for innovation. You have a lot of great tech entrepreneurs here. There's a lot of phenomenal companies here. There's great cell phone companies like Mobicom, and there's Zeal that's doing peer-to-peer lending. There's real stuff that's happening. On the other hand, 900,000, 1/3 of the country, are nomads. So what does that mean? It means that you have a close proximity to the people you want to help, but then you have access to people who can help them, who also are familiar with the culture and well integrated and have stable internet and stable computing and these types of things. So it's nice to be here. It's very educational, and it helps refine and focus the mission, and it helps really push us towards improving the systems of the world for everyone everywhere. And we learn a lot in the process, and it inspires us in the process, my company and the people with me. And we certainly brought a lot of great people. We brought Harris from the governance team, and Tony Rose from the identity team, and we have all the usual suspects like Jer and Tam and others, and some new faces as well. So that's Mongolia in a nutshell. And I have a special thing to show you guys as well. So Mongolians always give you good gifts. Check that out. So this is a short bow that you use on the back of a horse for all the archery practices that allowed them to be great hunters and conquer the world. And yes, I am going to take up Mongolian horse archery at some point. Be a lot of fun. Okay, first question. Charles, constructive criticism. Wish you would take a look now in the first world now solutions. Well, August, the problem is that the first world doesn't need a lot of the things that we're selling. And second, where they do need it, regulators prevent us from doing things. So every single market in the financial industry is usually heavily regulated. And there's good reasons for that, as we've seen with Celsius and Luna and these other things. So that regulation biases incumbents, and it's very slow to allow any notion of innovation. It's why you pay high fees at the bank. It's why credit cards are the way that they are. It's why everything is so annoying. And it's why you see very few new successful entrants in the financial industry. Regulation, they say, is for consumer protection, but usually it's for incumbency protection and anti-competitiveness. Then you look at the rest of the world, and there are 3 billion people who are underbanked or unbanked, and the governments that they live under are more willing to innovate with you, remove red tape, and allow you to try new and innovative business models. Now, if those models are global, they're peer-to-peer, and they're very low cost, they will work everywhere in the world, including America and Europe. And then policymakers are going to start getting a lot of questions from their constituents of, why is it the people in Mongolia and Ethiopia and other places have a better banking system, identity system, and a more fair financial system than we have in the United States? And the only answer they'll be able to give is, well, the reason for that is that our laws protect powerful people and powerful corporate interests. So you're just going to have to accept a substandard system. At some point, people will vote those policymakers out, and the new ones will change the system to open up these markets and allow them to be a bit more fair. Now, cynicism aside, there is some progress like the Financial Innovation Act and these other things that could make the United States, Europe, and other places really attractive and interesting markets to work in. But there's a huge amount of uncertainty right now. There's anti-clarity where regulators will say one thing and then say another thing through enforcement, in some cases be contradictory and inconsistent. So, what do? You innovate and, you build global solutions. And my company is very focused on the developing world. Cardano is a general purpose protocol. Anybody can use Cardano at any time to build anywhere. And there's over 1,000 dApp developers doing that right now for different verticals, from DEXs and so forth. The vast majority, the volume of those dApps that are being deployed or are deployed on Cardano are currently from European and American interests. So there's certainly people that are very focused on first world now solutions. But it's a much more complicated puzzle, I'd say, than most people let on. Please talk about Cardano and quantum cryptography, especially the announcement of government quantum cryptographic schemes. So Latipak is referencing the NIST standards for quantum crypto. Big winners were the Crystals framework. So congratulations to lattice-based crypto, and unsurprisingly Sphinx, which is best-in-class stateless hash-based crypto. So I did talk to NIST prior to NIST announcing this, and they said that the full thing will come out 2023, but 2022, they've had most of the bulk of the work done. Now that the cryptographic primitives are standardized, we are in a position where, sorry, there's a lot of chimes over there. Now that most of the cryptographic primitives have been standardized, we are in a position where hardware will start being built towards it. So ASICs will be constructed, and a massive slew of research will go into the primitives that have been selected, and people are going to build whole systems on top of it. So it's not necessary today for the remainder of the original Cardano roadmap to make a post-quantum Cardano. It was always a stretch goal, but the crypto just wasn't there, and the standards weren't there. Now that standards are there, I think it would be very wise for the next 5 years of Cardano to focus on swapping out or adding capabilities to embrace crystals, the lattice-based framework. So signature scheme, a post-quantum VRF, quantum things related to privacy, and ultimately model a quantum adversary against a consensus algorithm. And I think these things together will enable basically Cardano to be end-to-end immune to a quantum computer, as far as we know. It's hard to say because the hardware is not there, so you can't test it and say, well, it doesn't do anything. But for known algorithms, and lattice-based crypto is a really cool area. There's a lot of depth to it. It's more complicated, and there are downsides for lattice-based cryptography and for all post-quantum crypto. The downsides principally are that the key sizes are much larger, the signature sizes are much larger, the verification times are much longer, and it does take a lot of effort to implement these things. And because they're more involved, the complexity of the cryptographic protocols means that there's a higher chance of problems from bad implementations, side channel attacks, backdoors in the implementations, code issues where the semantical translation is not right, little things like that. Crystals won't work from Andre Papa. Thank you, armchair cryptographic expert on YouTube. Very glad that you're here. Now, this is an interesting one. Thoughts on the Hunter Biden cover-up? This is just a great example of media double standards and bias. When people believe something and have an agenda, how easy it is for them to focus on one person but not another, or to excuse the behavior of another person. We all do this as humans, and we all have fuck-ups in our families. Hunter Biden is a pretty scummy fuck-up. He's clearly taking videos of himself measuring drugs with hookers in different countries, and he's just not a good guy. That's not the problem. If you have a family member, a friend, a son, a relative who has a drug addiction or is a scumbag, that's not the father's fault. That's not the mother's fault. That's not the brother's fault. That's not fair. We've gone past that in society of saying the sins of the son are sins of the father. The bigger issue is, are people using their relationships and their political access to monetize? This is what happens in corrupt regimes. Oh, I'm brother with the president, so I can get you a meeting with him. Now, there's always been in society a bit of tolerance for this type of behavior. And we all kind of accept that if you're brothers with the president, maybe you have a way of introducing. Okay. Where it becomes unacceptable is if you say things like, well, if you give me $100,000, then I'll introduce you to my brother who's the president. That's wrong, and it's a crime. It's corruption. So the question is there evidence of that occurring? And you have a situation where something that should be a criminal justice investigation has become a political issue. And if you're a Democrat, you say, with no evidence at all, yes. And if you're a Republican, you say, well, because of the laptop, yes. And there's some emails. Now, ordinarily, there would be two institutions that would investigate this and provide some truth to it. One institution would be the Department of Justice. The other institution would be the media. And both of them have the capacity and ability to expose corruption and have done so many times. The problem with Hunter Biden is both institutions are not trusted because they actually picked a side. On the case of the media, they chose to say something that was real, wasn't real, and censor people who attempted to explore that because they felt it could impact an election. And in the case of the Department of Justice, it happens that the father of the person they would investigate is the president, who's their boss. So what do you do in these situations? You have an independent investigator look into it so that you have some notion of objectivity, and then you take a look and see if there's corruption, and there probably is, because there's a character deficit there, and it's easy to believe that that person went down that road. And then, it happens, and this shows you the consequences of propaganda with people. If there are Democrats listening to this right now, they instantly, viscerally say, well, what about Trump? What about Trump? You notice we're not talking about Trump at all. This has nothing to do with Trump. Zero, zilch. This has nothing to do with your most hated person with the political party you disagree with. This has everything to do with the specific facts and circumstances of the specific president today. And it's just a question of, do we live in a nation where we're tolerant of people monetizing family connections? And in some cases, against the best interest of the United States. And if you're comfortable with that because you politically agree with the person, okay. If you're not comfortable with that, shouldn't there be an independent investigation? Because there indeed is enough evidence in the public domain. There people who aren't qualified being put on boards and making millions of dollars. It doesn't sit right. It doesn't taste right. And you know what? An IG can look into many things, an independent investigator. They could look into other White House administrations, and perhaps that should be the standard. I don't have all the answers, but it's just very distasteful. And it's just an issue where something that should be investigated by two institutions is not. Instead of asking the question, why are those institutions not doing it and clearing people, we turn it into a political issue. And if you're on Team Blue, you have a side, and you're on Team Red, you have a side. Hunter Biden could be completely innocent of the allegations. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I don't have all the evidence. The point is there's enough there, and there's enough suspicion there that a reasonable person would conduct an investigation. If anything, just to ensure that the president is cleared. You have to hold the presidency to a very high standard because they're endowed with so much power and information. And if there's compromising factors, that's an issue. Everybody seemed to be completely okay with that assertion when Trump was under investigation for nearly 2 years about Russia collusion. That was a good thing to do. I remember every week on Saturday Night Live, Alec Baldwin would be there, and they had Robert De Niro as Robert Mueller, and they're talking about how he's going to go to jail and all these things. And that was just the thing, and totally appropriate, and we were okay with that as a society. But apparently we're not when the other political side does something, because the people who decide norms happen to be in that camp. This is not how you run a society. It's not how you run an organization. You start with principles and values. You don't start with politics. And you apply them equally to everybody and fairly to everybody. And again, if you feel they were not fairly applied to Trump, well, then apply them. I will remind everybody listening that 1 million Americans have died from COVID. I'll remind everybody listening that our economy was badly damaged from the response to COVID. We now have 9% official inflation. I would argue it's 20 to 25%. The largest wealth transfer in American history has happened. For-profit companies were given billions of dollars to build products, told they have no risk in deploying those products, they cannot be sued, and given guaranteed marketplaces for those products. When we had the Defense Production Act, and we didn't have to do that, no one in Washington wants to conduct an investigation into the origins of COVID and the response to it. No congressional hearings, none of this stuff. Apparently, we just forget it and move on. 1 million Americans died, more than World War II. But the most important investigation is the January 6th hearing right now. That's where politics are at. That's how people choose to spend their time. Hi, Charles. Will Cardano be ISO 222 compliant? Yeah, I've asked about it, and we have a team looking at it. It's a collection of standards. Some would be relevant to us, and some would not be relevant to us. So we'll figure it out. Thanks, Charles, for AMAs. Have you heard of Canada's Bill C-11 trying to regulate the internet streaming services? It wouldn't surprise me. I'm not familiar with that particular piece of legislation, but there's been a marked increase in totalitarianism up north. And there seems to be a group of people there that's want to run everything from cradle to grave. Politically, I've always been a libertarian, so I get uncomfortable with these things, but I don't know. I don't think you should discriminate packets of information, electrons, and thoughts, and say some are appropriate and some are not. I just always have felt that way, but I'm not familiar with it, so I can't speak on it. But I just know what I've seen and what I've heard from my Canadian friends up north. This is an example of where pop culture comes colliding in with mathematics. So, hi, Charles. Can you discuss how meaningful Gödel's incompleteness theorems are? What are the profound philosophical implications of these proofs? It seems like these proofs speak beyond mathematics. So, Kurt Gödel and David Hilbert and Russell and Gottlob Frege and Turing and Alonzo Church and all these people, they were on a class of mathematics where they were really thinking about the foundations of mathematics. So in the 19th century and before, math, except for geometry, was on fairly shaky foundations. And it bothered the hell out of mathematicians who want to be very rigorous and very precise in what they say. And so they said, let's put mathematics on much more solid foundations. Okay, so you have definitions, axioms, things you say are true without proof. And then from those axioms, you build an entire system. So there is this concept of completeness, which says that if you write the rules down, if you have some arbitrary statement that you make in your system, we usually call it a well-formed formula. And that arbitrary statement, can you, with the things you've assumed to be true, make an assertion about that? Can you prove it? It's true or false in your system. You're complete if for all things you can write down, you can do that. Now, there's a very closely related concept of decidability. And decidability usually is called the Entscheidungs problem. My German's terrible, but it means decision problem of, can you create an algorithm, a series of steps to reduce that well-formed formula to bedrock, the axioms, and derive a truth value, or at least reach a decision. Yes, no, undecidable. They're closely related but different problems. So what the completeness theorem is basically saying, the incompleteness theorem, is that they have these things called Gödel encodings. So they use these clever numbers and these clever constructions. But basically what the proof says at its core is that if you have some formal system that does the kinds of things that we like in math, like arithmetic and first order logics and these things, the things that like make math useful and connected to reality, then what happens is that you always can construct something that's outside of the system in terms of your ability to derive a truth value for it. So in other words, however big your system gets, you need another axiom to be able to cover something. But the clever magic of Gödel was that the minute you add that, you can construct another thing with that axiom recursively that basically allows you to then create another statement that you can't prove. So you're always in a situation where you have stuff that's outside of your system. Now, for 70 plus years, this is a known result. Mathematicians accept it and they say, oh, well, that doesn't mean you can't have complete systems. Hilbert's formalization of geometry is a complete system. So that's fine. It just says that the way that math is constructed right now, we do not have completeness. Is that a problem? No, because these things that we can't talk about aren't meaningful for most mathematical conversations. And so most mathematicians study it and ignore it. It's a class you take. And then oh yeah, I learned about foundations of math. Yeah, there we go. You can talk about it at a cocktail party, but it's not meaningful. Then the philosophers got a hold of it and they said, this is why there's a difference between cognition and intelligence, consciousness and artificial intelligence. This is why man can never know the vastness of the universe. This is why we can never build perfect systems because there are things that are beyond our comprehension. And Gödel proved this. It's like, he didn't say anything about that. Math is a language. It's a game. You set some rules up. There is a system of how you manipulate those rules, and they construct up the things. Just so happens that that game occasionally overlaps with physics, with real life stuff. And when it does, it's useful for real life things. But there's whole fields of math that don't connect to real life things and are utterly, utterly useless. And you can actually construct completely different rules for math. And there are mathematicians who do this. They're called set theorists. Woodin is one of them, Woodin. He is, omega set theory and these crazy things. And he tries to construct systems where the continuum hypothesis is false. A completely different rule set. And you can, with different rules, something that's true in ZFC set theory, standard mathematics, would not be true in a different set of rules. Is that okay? Sure. It's perfectly fine. It's constructed reality. Now, I'm very interested in this topic because at the Hoskinson Center for Formal Mathematics, the center that we set up at CMU, we're very interested in a branch of math called constructive mathematics. And we're very interested in what can you write down that can be machine understandable. Anything that lives in these weird Gödel realities of abstractions, because they can't be formulated in a formal system, it's very difficult for a computer to reason about them. So there's certain branches and areas of math that are intrinsically more difficult to describe in productive ways such that you can constructively get a proof that's machine verifiable. So yeah, it's useful from that side, from that standpoint, but it's useless from a philosophical viewpoint. I think you're barking up a completely wrong tree. There's a much more interesting tree, which is the gap of perception. How we cognate, how we think, how we perceive is not real relative to reality. There's a gap in reality from what we see and hear from what actually is happening. This is what you see and hear is a constructed reality that is the best your brain can process. And your brain can't process everything right. And so it fills in the gaps with extrapolations, but you're not actually seeing real reality. Cognitive neuroscience will tell you this, and there's plenty of great books written about it that float around. They say reality is a lie. So given that there's a gap, a perception gap between how it really is and what we perceive, that means that there's so much more beauty and nuance to the universe that if we could get extra perceptions, we would maybe be able to think in different ways. For example, human beings, we can't process four-dimensional reality. We can write it down in mathematical formulas and write books about it, and we can do art and kind of imagine what four-dimensional space would look like, but we don't think in 4D, we think in 3D. But if we had hyperspatial perception, maybe the universe would be a completely different animal to us. There are people who are born with completely different senses than our senses. Synesthesia is an example of that. So they perceive things differently. Music can be colors. Oh, that note is blue and that note is red, and C flat, C sharp is yellow. These types of things. Okay. And synesthesia people actually, if they're clever about it, a lot of them become memory champions because that extra dimension of perception is very useful in construction of memory palaces and other memory techniques that people use. There's a great book called Moonwalking with Einstein, and Wednesday is Indigo Blue, I think is what it's called. So Moonwalking Einstein is about memory, and Wednesday's Indigo Blue is about synesthesia. So it's an interesting thing. So I don't pay too much attention to it. There are plenty of books about this. Most of them are written by philosophers, not mathematicians. But, if you're really interested in the philosophy of mathematics and you want to go down that road, then what you ought to do is you ought to read lectures on the philosophy of mathematics by Joel David Hampkins. He's a professor at Oxford. Wonderful book, and it'll take you through a lot of this stuff. What are your thoughts on Saylor claiming Cardano as a security? Well, Mike Saylor is the Tone Vase of this cycle of, him and Jimmy Song of this cycle of crypto. So back in the day, we had Tone, and Tone was this podcast. He's still around, and I like Tone. But he had this thing, it's like everything's a scam. It's a scam. It's a scam. Oh, it's a scam. Oh my God, it's a scam. Everybody's scamming. He even had this thing called the Scammies. It was his awards ceremony, the Scammies. So now we got Mike Saylor. He's like, Bitcoin is the way. Again, it doesn't do anything for RealFi. I can't build a decentralized power grid. I can't build a centralized telecommunications company. I can't build a centralized compute. I have no identity solution. It's not programmable, so I don't have dApps and DeFi. I can't even issue an asset, so I have no NFTs, right? It's all outside of that. But don't worry, layer 2 protocols that are highly centralized will somehow solve all of this. Great. So that's great. It's the best thing ever, and it's so magical, and who cares about the mining and all this? Everything else is scam, and everything else is security. Nobody controls it. It's completely decentralized, far more than Bitcoin. Has more use and utility. People buy the token not to speculate, which is the only thing they can do with Bitcoin. They buy the token to use it for stuff, I don't know, medical records and whatever the hell else they're doing because it is real life utility. But that's a security. But the thing that only thing you can do is speculate on is not. I think Mike's head is all fucked up and screwed up. It's just one of those cases where he's dick deep, full dick in with Bitcoin. And so, it's got to work. If it doesn't work the way he hopes, he goes bankrupt. So I don't pay much attention to it. And I don't think it's a productive conversation at all. And frankly, the most difficult, toxic, and useless people to engage with are Bitcoin maximalists. They're not intellectually honest, like Jimmy Song saying that at any given time, in a proof of stake system, somebody can just arbitrarily take all your money and shut it down. It's not honest. It's just libel. It's not true. The protocols don't do that. And they feel they have no burden of proof and evidence of the statements that they make. And then they say the only thing that matters is their thing, even though their thing doesn't do anything. Just stores value. Okay. Charles, what are your thoughts about the World Economic Forum? It's a fun event to go to spend a hell of a lot of money, play private jet bingo, especially amongst the environmentalists. How dare you? And then they show up on a private jet. And have people who think they're smarter than you tell you how to run your life from cradle to grave. In other words, I don't fit in at all. Okay. I'll wear my fur and my boots there, and I'll take the train. They're a special crowd. I could have gone this year. I said, no way, no how. Instead I went to Consensus. We did send some people. Joel Teltner and Rachel Epstein, they both went. Joel is our chief legal officer, and Rachel does our government policy stuff in DC. And they talked about law and policy because FATF is there and these other people are there. But it's just one of those things where a lot of very wealthy, powerful people need to justify why they're in charge. And they create a reality where everybody needs their solutions. And there's no accountability and feedback loop. I don't like it. It's very distasteful. And I don't think I'm ever going to go again to the World Economic Forum. There are much better events, like the Milken Institute event. Mike Milken, say what you will about the guy. He's extremely solutions-oriented and very gracious, super nice to me when I met him. And every person I met there, a lot of them were really obsessed with solving problems. And you can't tell me that's not as prominent as WEF. I mean, everybody was there. Even Mnuchin was there. I mean, you had senators and congressmen there, Fortune 500 CEOs there. Come on. Got to learn about goop. So no, not a big fan. Mm-hmm. Hi, Charles. I'm so sorry if you've already addressed this, but why is your shirt flickering? Is it made of mithril? If not, would you give an update on mithril? Well, no, unfortunately, I don't have a mithril shirt. I wish I did. It'd be a lot of fun. Mithril's a great material, and I wish it existed. I can give you an update on mithril. They're on a 2-week development cadence, and they've been moving along, doing all their proof of concept. Mithril is in what's called the applied research phase. So there's a collection of open questions that need to be resolved and proofs of concept that need to be done. And the end result of that will be full end-to-end verification that mithril as a protocol is viable at scale and in production. Then what happens as mithril leaves applied research is mithril will enter into a productization phase where partners will work to integrate mithril. We'll do this with Lace, our wallet, and then we, of course, will work with others, hopefully DC Spark with Flint and, the Vacuum Labs guys with Ada Light and maybe Roy and so forth. And then basically the goal would be designing a pluggable modular interface so that mithril can be used and commoditized in that respect. So phase one is getting all the rust off and figuring out how it works. And we're deep in the weeds. And we've gotten to a point where we feel mithril is quite viable. And now there's going to be an inflection point, a translation point from applied research to pluggability. Now, we've improved our processes to a point where we're able to do things very quickly. We have a 2-week development sprint with mithril. So every 2 weeks, I get a full report, and they're answering questions at a pretty good rate. So I'm optimistic that towards the end of the year, that all the applied research for mithril will be done. And then it's just a question of what is the gap between that implementation and what we'd like to do for productization. Given that there's tight integration with the Lace team and tight integration with the Galwad developers and our developers, the delta between what the applied research is doing and what will end up in market is pretty small. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of latency on that turnaround. Hydra, by the way, is also an applied research project, but it's following a very similar trajectory, and it already has commercial partners who are working to integrate. So I'm quite happy about it. So for those of you who don't know, mithril is a long-term play for Cardano inclusive accountability. So basically the idea is that if you have a cryptocurrency transaction sent to you from Cardano, you'd like to be able to verify 2 facts. 1, that the tokens on that transaction are real, and 2, they haven't been double spent. The canonical way of verifying this is either having a full node, which means that you're able to check it against your entire version of history, or trusting a third party in some way to help you with that verification. Both are suboptimal because the full node is very large, and it's only going to get larger as Cardano gets more used, and suboptimal, with trusting people, because the whole point of crypto is trust nobody. You lack a property called inclusive accountability. With mithril, you can send on the wire with the transaction a proof, and you should be able to check that proof with less than the full blockchain. So a small amount of data, several megabytes, which means that cell phones can have the same level of security as a full node once you have this running. So ultimately, it means your light wallets can be just as secure as full node wallets. That's why we've invested a lot of time, effort, money into trying to figure out this technology. And, there's some very heavy approaches like Plumo, which is what Cello's using, and what Mina's doing with recursive snarks. And okay, but they still need an archive for the blockchain. So to me, it makes sense to use a simpler cryptographic primitives, simpler implementation that you can bring to market in a year horizon that basically accomplishes the same thing in practice that these guys are doing. But I don't know, maybe I've been in the business too long and I'm just jaded or something. Do you see a way that Cardano and Algorand can collaborate? Yeah, I do. Algorand is very similar to Cardano in terms of its philosophy. They're very different in terms of technology. And now that John is over at Algorand, I'm glad he landed at a place commensurate with his skill set. I do believe through John that there's a lot of opportunities to do joint efforts. Like we both have similar problems in post-quantum crypto. And actually, there's some great people on the Algorand side that are experts in lattices. Craig Gentry, for example, is over on that side of the rainbow. So I'm very optimistic that we can figure out some collaborations where and when it makes sense for both parties. But remember, it's 2 keys. So even if it makes sense for us, it has to make sense for them. And it's one of those things where we can talk to them about it. Charles, what about projects from Luna going to Polygon and not to Cardano? Well, first off, if they built on Luna to begin with, you have to question their judgment. Second, people go to Polygon because Polygon pays them. People come to Cardano because they like Cardano. That's the difference. And Polygon, you know that's true. Don't even try it. Charles, what's the best method for storing key phrases? I am going to do a follow-up video to my InfoSec video. I've gotten a lot of feedback on it. I just haven't had the time for it. I will talk about some key phrase best practice methods that can be done. I'm really pushing for a standard with encrypted QR codes for cold wallet generation. I think it was so powerful because the problem is what people do is they write down their keywords, usually on a Word document or something, and print it. Or they print a paper wallet as a backup store, but printers are insecure and they tend to keep memories, so you can replay them. So if somebody's used a printer, you can actually reprint a lot of the things that the printer's printed before. So it's not a good approach. And if you had a encrypted QR code, if there was a replay attack, they'd just get another copy of an encrypted wallet. Wouldn't do anything. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I'll do another video for you guys. Someone called Mike Alfred. He wanted to ask a question to Charles. He said in Twitter, well, Mike, you're welcome to come here and ask a question, man. I'm willing to answer anything you ask. You might not get the answer you like, but I'm willing to do it. Can you talk about oracles coming to Cardano? Yeah, there are a lot of people building them, and oracles are connected to the Vossel hard fork. So how about that? Any thoughts on Mishinsky? He who flies too close to the sun shall watch the wax melt from his wings and fall to the earth. What was the European Union Project IOG doing? That was for decentralized software updates. It was a Horizon 2020 program. We completed it, wrote a whole report, and have a protocol for it. Charles, someone who wants to work blockchain tech as career, what college major is more helpful in the field? Math major or CS major? What I would do is do a CS major and 2 minors, do a minor in math and minor in economics. And think a lot about systems theory. You can't go wrong with that. You can do a little bit of everything. Just build stuff. Study tokenomics, write code. Why do you own all 7 multi-key SIGs? We don't. See, people just lie. Lie. Now there's a tripartite structure, guys. You did a great job at Congress. When will you go again? Probably going to go to the Senate next time, and working on it. Charles, I love how you are so blunt. I respect everything you and your team do for Cardano. All the best. Well, thank you so much, GNet. I am very blunt at times. It's why a lot of people don't like me. And also a lot of people just seem absolutely convinced I'm the worst human being alive. And they write books about it, and soon to be movies about it. But at the end of the day, I'm just a guy, and I'm trying to figure it out as much as you guys are trying to figure it out. It's complicated stuff. We're literally rewriting the fabric of reality, if you think about it. And I've gone to the ends of the earth, 72 countries. 72 countries, that's a lot. And I've met so many thousands of people. I've been in so many thousands of meetings. All I do all day long is be in one meeting, another meeting, read this book, read that book, read this report, read that report, prep for this. Testify in Congress on one hand and go and talk with the president of Mongolia on the other hand. It's my life, these types of things. And to the people who like me, they say, wow, that's so cool. And the people who hate me, they say it's all made up. It doesn't exist. or even though it does exist, it in no way impacts anything, and then it's all just an elaborate fantasy. It's a bizarre space. You know, I own 4 companies, and crypto is certainly my biggest. And yet I do stuff in biotechnology, and I do stuff in ag tech, and you know, I do stuff on my ranch. And in all these cases, I'm treated like a human being with good consideration. You know, I'll just give you a great example. The media in Wheatland, the town that I live in Wyoming, they wrote an article about a restaurant that I'm opening in Wheatland called Nessie's, after the Loch Ness Monster. And I went and bought a plesiosaur skeleton. By the way, if you buy dinosaur bones, you think crypto people are shady. It's like dino bone people are the shadiest people in the world. But it was a replica of a plesiosaur. It wasn't too expensive, but it's a beautiful replica. And you know, I'm going to put it in the restaurant, and the body will be in the basement where the whiskey bar is, and then the neck, because it's 40 feet long, will, you know, well over 10 meters, will actually go up into the main floor for, you know, diners at the Scottish restaurant. Everybody's excited about it. Now, if this was crypto and I announced I'm building Nessie's, I would have 1/3 of the town say Nessie's is a scam, it doesn't exist. I'd have another group of people in town say, well, it does exist, but it'll never be completed. And when it's completed, it won't ever deliver anything, and the food is poison. And then I have another third of people that say Nessie's is our Lord and Savior, and only by going through the divine will of Nessie's can you, in any way, shape, or form, find the true salvation and peace of society. I mean, crypto is weird. It's so weird. It's so toxic at times, and it's so just brutal at times. Just a great example would be, I testified before Congress. Not once did I mention Cardano. Not once, because I said I'm representing the industry here, not my company, not Cardano, the entire industry, and why this industry is useful for everyone. So I go up there, and I'd like to believe I did well. Not a single layer 1 CEO, not a single company in that constellation of things in the top 10 said, retweeted it, congratulations, this is good testimony. Not a single one. You know, you go to cryptocurrency Reddit, before I testified, the vitriol there, the hate there, the statements there that were said. And then afterwards they said, well, you did a good job, but you're still a shitbag. I was fighting for you guys. I was fighting for the industry as a whole. We have to stand together or we will die as an industry. The regulators aren't going to differentiate your token and coin from another token and coin. Bad regulation will affect every single person in this industry. But that's not the maturity and mentality and mindset of the industry. And instead, it's like your thing is evil and my thing is great. And anybody who disagrees with me is evil and wrong. It's just bizarre, and it's very draining at times. And so you have to refresh yourself, and that's why we do the community events, and that's why we talk to people, because in these cases, what they do for you is they show you that, well, that's Reddit and Twitter and the leadership of the industry. The real people who actually use the products and are excited about it, by and large, are good people. By and large, they're really excited about the prospect of using these things to change the world. And if you expose yourself to that, you're happy. But you got to take a shower and scrub yourself off every fucking time you go to these industry events and other things, because these people are just really terrible people. And I don't know why our industry has accumulated so many of them. Certainly there's a lot of egos in medicine. Certainly there's a lot of egos in Silicon Valley. But I've never seen this density of toxicity and self-righteousness and a lack of respect and appreciation for things. It is what it is. Charles, can you discuss what is the relationship between IOG, Cardano, Mongolia, and what are some of the ongoing projects, and how is adoption in Mongolia going? Well, the people led, as I mentioned earlier in the AMA, 140,000 Mongols are using Cardano in some way, which is really impressive growth and adoption. It would be nice to do a digital identity and a supply chain system Because if you look at the needs of Mongolia in the agricultural sector, there are 5 animal types that are primarily important: horses, camels, the dromedaries, so the the 2-hump camels, not the 1-hump. So you have cattle, you have camels, yaks, you have goats, and you have, I believe, sheep. The 5 agricultural animals, actually horses, excuse me, as your agricultural animals. So the goats are the most important part of Mongolian agriculture because that's where the cashmere comes from. Gobi Group is a gargantuan company, and they export most of that, and they sell at great prices. When you look at the supply chains, there's something called the third neighbor policy, and there's this attempt to be able to try to export a lot of the agricultural goods to the United States and other places without tariffs. The problem is that they have to adhere to certain quality standards, or else the USDA is just not going to let that happen. And so how do you prove that? There needs to be a blockchain-based system that enables people to basically make statements about the life cycle of the animals and what they've gone through. Now, there's great technology. For example, let me show you this. There's a company called Sears Tag, for example. This link. Yeah, so let me share my screen real quickly here. Share screen. Wah! Wah! There we go. So if you take a look at Sears Tag, you can actually see these little devices, and they go on the ear of the cattle or the goat or whatever you want, and they're a full computer, and they basically tell you where your animals are at. And they have a little solar panel to keep them going, and they do a whole bunch of things: mortality alerts, activity monitoring, the temperature so they don't overheat, these types of things. This is kind of generation 1 IoT for cattle tagging. And it'd be really cool to see what we could do to get to generation 2, generation 3 stuff. And, Mongolia would be a perfect place to pilot it. So if you can get better coverage of the country with some form of telecommunications, so maybe what World Mobile is doing, then you could get reliable connectivity in the most rural of places. And then if you could tag every animal, you could follow the life cycle. Now, it seems like it'd be a somewhat expensive thing to do. There's about 80 million animals in Mongolia, only 3 million people that are used in the agricultural sector. But if you can get to that like $2-3 price point, you're talking about maybe $250 million for end-to-end tracking of all of the animals in the country. It's really not that expensive for all things considered from a nation-state viewpoint. And then if you could trace the entire life cycle, you can know where the animal's at, what they've been exposed to, the geographies they've gone to, the diet of plants that they've had. You're not going to get milk sick from them. You can know a lot about the antibiotic intake that they've had, accurate logging, then suddenly the export makes a lot more sense. So these are the kinds of things I'm very interested in, and it's a great play for Atala Prism because there's a track and tracing solution and an identity solution, because you can give an identity to a person, you can give an identity to a yak. You can create a verified NFT to represent an asset like a ball of cashmere, these types of things. And it'd be a lot of fun to chase and explore that. So we talked to Abuna, the Minister of Digital Transformation, and a few others in the government. And, at some point, I think we're ready to go. We were scaling up to do something, then COVID hit. And if I have to send a lot of people, it just doesn't work. So I said, all right, well, just Mongolia's not going anywhere. Let's calm down a little bit, and, we'll circle back to it. So hopefully in 2023, we'll be able to do something pretty cool. Isn't that boutique, considering now that most factory farmed is abomination? Yeah, it's pretty bad. And then you got two groups, one that says just eat insects instead. At World Economic Forum, insects are good for you. And then you got another group. They're like, well, just make meat in a lab. So you can either have your cylinder of salmon, or you can have your grasshopper souffle. Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with the real deal, guys. I don't know. Hi, Charles. When will the paper on decentralization be completed? The term is still being thrown around the industry. It's a summer project that Agalos is personally going to attend to. So probably August, September, if I had to guess. But, it just depends. And then the EDI will be established before the end of the year. And then it can be kind of a guiding star for things. Bees, more bees, please. Not the bees, not the bees. Ah! If you guys get that Nick Cage reference, congratulations. You are a nerd. Pray for me, y'all. I leave for rehab this coming week and I'm scared shitless. Well, just I don't know what you're going through, but you have our thoughts and prayers. Do you ingest lion's mane daily? How much? Can you explain the benefits of whether it's good for elderly cognitive ability? There are placebo-controlled studies from Japan and other places that show that ingestion of lion's mane in the right freshness and the right amount over a gram per day does result in the creation of new nerves in the brain, so neurogenesis. So there's some BDNF action there, and that's directly related to improvement of cognitive decline. Now, the studies that are out of Japan, they're quite small, and they need more studies, I'd say, before you can make a definitive prescription, say there's a causal relationship that the ingestion of lion's mane is actually solving a problem or slowing down a problem like dementia. That said, I'm very bullish and optimistic because it doesn't do any harm. It's not a toxic mushroom. It's quite tasty. It's easy to ingest in many different forms, from raw to tea and powders and so forth. I grow them myself. So when we have our clinic fully operational, we will try to replicate the Japan study and do a placebo-controlled double-blind study. We'll see if the different in dosaging from tablets to powder to tea to raw ingestion have any indication on what we see. The advantage we have is we can actually do brain scans because we have the imaging center to do that. And we also are going to fully sequence the genomes of everybody we do clinical trials on at my clinic. So if we notice that particular patients are especially receptive in the data, that they are telling us that, then what we can do is look at it and see if there's a genetic reason for that, in addition to just a gross thing of age and gender and weight and these types of things. So very exciting potentially. And, as with all things in the supplement business, you have to be careful because people tend to hype things up. But like resveratrol and NAD and other things, there's definitely evidence that this is good for you. And in the case of lion's mane, it's good for cognitive abilities, and you're not going to do any harm taking it. So, try it out and see if it works for you. But we don't have the clinical evidence to say definitively that lion's mane is doing something interesting. Just have some stuff. Have you seen the new Cardano book? I've seen that, but not read. But I hear it's good. Charles, great to have you back. Can you explain what defines settlement time on Cardano? It's probabilistic finality, just like Bitcoin, and so you just have to wait for a series of confirmations. So after a collection of blocks, depending upon your risk tolerance, the chance of a fork or reversal, a rollback, is so low that it's a safe transaction. So I think the rule of thumb we had in the olden days was 15 confirmations, but I don't recall what we've set that parameter at now. And it changes. And there's going to be a lot of changes with some of the new fast settlement papers that we've been writing, and some of we've already released, like ledger combiners and ledger redux, and then also with the input endorsers design, which will have a dramatic change. So currently it's ephemeral, but it's very fast. I mean, you have equivalent finality to Bitcoin in a matter of minutes, whereas Bitcoin takes hours. And that was always the benchmark. And I think for most applications, that's fine. If you need a little faster, there are some hacks that you can do to improve your trust model. And then when we get the new papers, we'll get BFT style instant finality. Hi, Charles. Do you meditate or practice mindfulness regularly, or is meditation retreat a one-off thing? Love you. I do meditate, but not as often as I need to. And right now I'm really involved in neural stimulation. So you actually map the brain with an EEG, and then you attach electrodes to different parts, and you shock it. And then neurons are kind of electrophilic, so they mimic the signals that they get. So if you shock it just the right way, you can shock the brain into different states. You can make a person feel seasick or drunk or have their head spin, or you can knock them into a hyper-focused state, like a deep, deep alpha state, 13 to 15 hertz, like you're in a flow state. So I've been doing a lot of experimentation with that with some domain experts. Hi, Charles. Can stake pools steal our ADA if they're bad people? No. We designed it so that they couldn't. You delegate, they never have access to your ADA. It's a non-custodial staking. Charles, I've been part of Cardano from day one. Something that perturbs me is that you and Vitalik are biting at each other's ankles like Yorkshire Terriers. Give me some evidence of it. Give me, like, what am I doing, man? Outside of a levity here and there, when it's brought up, I seldom think about the guy, talk about the guy, and you're the one talking about him. I have no issue with him. I see him from time to time at events and shake his hand, say, hey, how you doing? 1 minute, 2 minute conversation, move on. He's not my best friend in the whole wide world. We're not going fishing together on the weekends, not holding hands while walking horses off into the sunset. But at the same time, I don't really mind. I think the rivalry has been completely manufactured by the crypto media for some bizarre damn reason. And it's used to sell books. So I don't have an issue. But if you give me some specific issues here and there, I mean, we've disagreed strongly about consensus design. And certainly there's some things that I think Ethereum have done that have been tremendously counterproductive. And there are specific facts you can point to. The creation of Solidity, the way it was built, and the way the smart contracts are designed on Ethereum tend to lead to insecure smart contracts. There were $10.5 billion in hacks last year, a lot of them on Ethereum, a lot of them due to the way that they've done things. I vehemently and fundamentally disagree with the accounts model. I think extended UTXO is the only way to go long term for the kinds of things that we want to do in the cryptocurrency space. We'll let the market decide what they value, and we're competing in that respect, but it's not personal. When have I ever commented on intelligence, appearance, character, or these other things? On the other hand, the Ethereum side sure as hell has commented on my character as a human being with sketchy evidence at best. How's Snoop been? I think Champ's coming up to the ranch here in a little bit when I get back from Mongolia. Snoop's good. We're going to do a music video, man. It's going to be good. We'll figure this out. Got to get the Black Hawk in it, although I think we need to get an exhibition tag for it. So if the FAA, I'm just going to hire fucking Eminem, and we're just going to redo the Without Me song and be like, the FAA won't let me be. Just rewrite all the lyrics. Come on, guys. I love those cattle tags. Why not here in the United States? I'd love to do it in the United States, and I think actually we can. It'd be fun to do it in Wyoming. And we're looking into it. There was Beef Chain, and we did talk to them for a long time. I have my bison. I have 500 of them. I do need to tag them for crypto bison, so we'll look into it. Charles, pardon my ignorance. Was IOHK founded in Hong Kong? IOHK was a Hong Kong holding company. We still have a name from the legacy, but we no longer have any Hong Kong infrastructure at all. It's now U.S.-based C Corporation, and I was not living in Hong Kong. There were two places you would start companies in Asia, Singapore and Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a real city with real people. Singapore is the Dubai of Asia. It's like all one giant mall. It's very pretty, and it's very fake. Hong Kong, you would be in like Kowloon, and you'd go to some fish store, get something to eat, and you'd order a fish, and they just take it out of a tank and go hit it on the sidewalk and go cook it for you. The guy sitting to your left is like some old Chinese billionaire, and he's eaten at the same place for 45 years, and this is where he eats lunch. And so he's like the third richest guy in the entire city, and he's just sitting there eating a fish next to you that they've just killed on the sidewalk and they cook. It's a real city. It's very Grinchy, and I like that. But it's unfortunately changed quite a bit in the last 5 years, and it's become basically a proxy of China to the extent that there's no political autonomy or differentiation. I would not recommend starting a company in Hong Kong these days. I heard you were collaborating with Solana. It seems like you were quite a fan of their network. Collaboration with Solana would actually make a lot of sense. My brother, a little bit of lore in the family. My brother, before he became a doctor, actually ran a very successful business. It was called NintendoRepairHut.com. And I probably on Wayback Machine, you can see all of his inventory and the things that he did. But let me tell you, he did some great work. He would make for the old NESs like custom molds and actually create the new lids, because the lids would always break on the old Nintendos. And he actually got new pins made for the Nintendos because the original ones were made of too flimsy of a metal. And what happens when you push the game in too hard, it would bend the contacts. That's why when you blow on the cartridge, it actually makes contact better, because it provides a kind of a conductive fluid for it to go from the cartridge to those little pins that get bent. So the ones that my brother would make were made out of a stronger material, so when you put them in, it would fix the flashing light problem on the NES and so forth. So I was thinking, since Solana comes from that world, that maybe there's some legacy there. We could figure out how to turn it on and off, take it in and out, blow on the cartridge, these types of things. I don't know. It might be possible. But my brother doesn't do Nintendo stuff anymore. He's a doctor. Hi, Charles. How's IOHK prepared for a potential recession? We have strong economic moat, and our business lines are strong. That's the nice part about GovTech, is that you have long arc relationships, like the Ethiopia relationships, a multi-year relationship. So we have plenty of things we do, and those things are stable. Obviously, recession forever would not be good for anybody, but we're doing okay. We're not doing any mass layoffs or anything like that. We're continuing to hire. I think we have over 100 open roles right now inside the company that we're hiring for. And those roles are, of course, important. But more broadly, the problem with this recession is that it's impossible to know where the bottom is. We have an issue where the government's just not being honest. First, inflation is transitory and it's not going to happen. And the overwhelming majority of economists agree that there's no inflation. And it's like, everybody's like, well, you fucking crazy. You destroyed all the supply chains in the world and you've printed trillions of dollars out of thin air to shore up the economy. Of course, prices are going to go up. You don't need a fucking PhD to figure this out, guys. It's very simple stuff. So then they say, well, if you don't count the price of energy and meat, chicken, meat like pork, chicken, and beef, prices are great. So all the things that we have stockpiles of still somehow have consistent prices, but the things we have to produce under the new regime are more expensive, and you're saying inflation is transitory. So there's no honesty there. So if there's no honesty from the government authorities, then you just kind of have to, put your finger up there and say, how do I feel? What do I think? I think tech got hyper overvalued during the COVID era, and these unrealistic valuations are coming down. I think that there's still value in producing things. That's why I'm the ag tech, but it's not lost on me that hay is $350 a ton right now. It's nuts. It's also not lost on me that there's no reason for diesel and gasoline to be at these prices. Russia doesn't have that much of an influence on the global supply markets. There are other reasons for it. And depending on people's politics, they'll either engage with those reasons or not. So given that everything's become so political and truth is a rare commodity these days, we just navigate as we see fit. And we, of course, are more cautious and less ambitious about certain programs. And, there's things I'd love to do. Like for a long time, I've wanted to create my own trusted hardware modules that are open source. We're probably not going to do that until there's a bull market. There's a lot of products that I would like to pursue and launch and think about and be fun to explore. We're probably going to scale those back until this recession goes away. And it would be nice to live in an economic environment where I felt that the government's my partner in helping me succeed. And instead of an adversary that, the best case scenario is you can avoid the vampire as it rummages through your house and steals your shit. And the worst case is it discovers you and kills you. That's the current relationship we have with the U.S. government as an industry. And it's just got to stop. It's not fair and it's wrong. And I'm quite bitter about it because there's no reason for this to happen. And yes, of course there are problems. Well, then regulate those problems. Sure, unrestricted speculation is there, but it's the Wall Street guys who are fucking doing it. And I sat next to the Three Arrow Capital guys in Dubai. I told them straight to their faces that Luna looks like a fucking Ponzi scheme. And they said, well, we're making massive returns. You're an idiot. And a month later, they're bankrupt. Yeah, these are real problems. Regulate them then. But don't look at the entire industry and say every single person in the industry is a criminal, bad actor. And I think that's another cause of it. The places that are doing well are being punished, and the places that aren't are being subsidized with cheap money. And the cheap money is destroying the economy. It's creating rampant inflation, and that has to clear through. Exactly. The Fed has never been audited, so everything they tell us is a smoke up your butt. Back in 2011, when we were pushing for audit the Fed, I will never forget this. It was the same story almost everywhere. You talk to a congressman or a senator, and you'd be like, we need to audit the Fed. And their office would say, well, of course they're audited. You're crazy. We don't need to audit them. They're already audited by the normal government processes. And then some staffer would be like, well, actually, Congressman, we don't audit the Federal Reserve. And they would have this look of horror on their face. You're like, you mean to tell me the guys who print all the money in the United States have no oversight? Yes, Mr. Congressman. We need to do something about that. But it was almost like body snatchers. So they get real panicky. They talked to him a month later, and it was like, we do not need to audit the Fed. The Fed is great. We love the Fed. It's like, what happened to the congressman? Where did you go? So no, they got a whole thing going on there, guys, and they don't want to be audited because they don't want us to know what we're going to find. That was Ron Paul. Yeah, we had Tom Woods, and actually Peter Schiff was even part of that back in the old days before he went cray-cray. Hey, Charles, how's the research in offline transactions coming along? It does not require research. You just need proof of secure ratio. There's papers on that, and you need one of these. You need a phone with a trusted hardware module. That's all you need. That's all you need, and you're done. Unfortunately, it's stalled right now. There's not much we can do because there's a price point, and it's great for phones, but it needs to be like $1 if it's going to work. Yeah, it did. Peter's bank did get shut down, and Peter's like, well, I might accept Bitcoin for payment. And I was like, he said the thing. He said the thing. He said the thing. All right, let's do one more. All right, bonus question. Will your restaurant serve haggis? Oh, it's going to be grand. We're going to have the haggis in a nice sheep's stomach. It'll be, it's just, way a bit rough and tumble it would be. It's a 2-course meal. There's one that goes in the mouth and there's one that goes into the toilet. It'll be grand. Yes, we are going to have haggis. No one will order it. No one will eat it, but we will have it, and it's going to be fucking amazing. And then some weird Scottish guy is going to come in on vacation, and they'll be like, it's a finally America makes sense to me. I was saying, Whelan, what are you doing? I watched a video by Andrew Westberg, SPO for Cardano, saying IOG owned all 7 keys. We do not own them. There's delegated authority, but we have never been the legal owner of all 7. So it's just a lie. It's a straight up lie. It's delegated authority, and it's an agreement between the 3 entities so that we can do the hard forks that are pre-agreed on the roadmap. That system is being rotated out, and when a members-based open source project turns on, the whole system will be put over there. For key management, you have 4 properties. You have the legal owner, you have the custodians who actually hold the keys, you have the signers, usually a different party with delegated authority, and then you have the authorizers. The big one is here, the authorizers. Okay, the other parts, those can be put on chain or off chain. It just depends on how much risk you want to take. But here is the voting system. And if a relative majority wants to do it, let them do it. That's what Catalyst is bringing. Okay, and we're almost at that point. As for the other components, it's transferred over to a member-based thing, and it goes from a set of 3 to arbitrarily large set. The set of signers can be 100. Guys, it's not rocket science, and people are making a mountain out of a fucking molehill. There's a roadmap to execute. All right, come on, give me a good one to add. Are you really part Italian? Yes, sir, I am. Quarter Italian. And I can even post my 23andMe results if you want to see that. Please touch on LACE again. Good question to end on. So LACE is one of my favorite projects. We're working real hard on it. We will have an announcement later on LACE, but I will say this. I think it long-term is going to be one of the best wallets in the entire cryptocurrency industry and the first for a lot of things. And finally, to end, Charles, have you ever heard of Göbekli Tepe, the ancient monolithic structure from 9,500 BC that suggests humanity's history goes further back than thought? There's a very interesting theory about this. So some people believe that around 10,000, 11,000 BC, there was an ancient empire. This is kind of the Atlantean thing. And that those people were very widespread across the entire world, which is why we have architectural reoccurrences of like pyramids and certain icons and certain gods and so forth. And that a catastrophic event occurred, probably a meteor strike or some sort of celestial body striking into the earth that put the earth, or a massive volcanic eruption that put the earth into a state where life became very difficult for a period of time. So areas flooded that shouldn't have flooded, and it would destroy a high population empire. The rulers of that empire, the leadership, the smart people who survived, they would fled around the world, and then the places that they fled to, like Turkey, where Göbekli Tepe is, or Egypt, eventually started imprinting their culture. Now, we have some ancient sources like Plato, and what's really interesting is Plato's description of Atlantis and his timelines match perfectly with things that we discovered in the Arctic many years later, about a catastrophic event that occurred about 11,000 years ago. So who knows if it's true or not. Unfortunately, the archaeological evidence is very bad because things don't tend to survive that long. The reason why Tepe survived so long was that it was buried, and it looks like on purpose somebody actually covered it over. Maybe they overthrew their tyrants. But it would make a lot of sense. Language has been around for a long time. Empires come and go, and we discover new things all the time. So it could make sense that this exists. And my bet is if we were to discover it, we'd discover it in South America, because that is the least investigated from an archaeological perspective of all continents. And there are empires there as ancient as Egypt, and maybe even further back. And perhaps the jungles preserve something. Or maybe we'll discover it in the sands of Egypt. Who knows? Anyway, as Paul Harvey would say, that's the rest of the story. Thank you all for another wonderful AMA. I'm going to go now and get some breakfast and get prepared for the graduation event tonight. It's good to be here in Mongolia. Cheers.